The first postcard came from Forfar in Scotland. "I thought you might like a picture of Forfar," it began. "You've always been so interested in Scotland, and that's one reason why I'm interested in you. I've enjoyed all your books, but do you really get to grips with people? I doubt it. Try to think of this as a handshake from your devoted admirer, W.S." Like other novelists, Walter Streeter was used to getting communications from strangers. He always answered them, for he was conscientious. But this took up the time and energy he needed for his writing, so that he was rather relieved that W.S. had given no address. The photograph of Forfar was uninteresting, and he tore it up. His anonymous correspondent's criticism, however, lingered in his mind. Did he really fail to come to grips with his characters? Perhaps he did. Perhaps W.S. had spotted this. Walter made a vow to be more objective. 10 days later arrived another postcard, this time from Berwick-on-Tweed. "What do you think of Berwick-on-Tweed?" it said. "Like you, it's on the border. I hope this doesn't sound rude. I don't mean that you're a borderline case. I admire your stories. Some people call them otherworldly. I think you should plump for one world or the other. Another warm handshake from W.S." Walter Streeter pondered over this and began to wonder. Otherworldly, indeed? Really? He reread the last 2 chapters he'd written. Perhaps they didn't have their feet firm on the ground, but did that matter? He threw the picture of Berwick-on-Tweed into his November fire and tried to write. But the words came haltingly, as though contending with a barrier of self-criticism. The third postcard showed a picture of York Minster. "I know you're interested in cathedrals," it said. "I'm sure this isn't a sign of megalomania in your case, but smaller churches are sometimes more rewarding. I'm seeing a good many churches on my way south. Are you busy writing or looking around for ideas? Another hearty handshake from your friend W.S." Oddly enough, Walter Streeter was interested in cathedrals, but how could W.S. have known that? And who was W.S. anyway? For the first time it struck him that the initials were his own. And the idea came into his mind, suppose I'd been writing postcards to myself. People did such things, especially people with split personalities. Not that he was one of them, of course. And yet there was this unexplained development in his own writing, so that he was making one paragraph languorous and another sharp and incisive, with main verbs and full stops. He now had to admit to himself that this postcard business had become a leading factor in his life. It had created thoughts and feelings that were most unhelpful. His whole being was strung up in the expectation of the next postcard. Yet when it came, it took him, as the others had, completely by surprise. He couldn't bring himself to look at the picture. "I'm coming nearer," the postcard said. "I've got as near as Coventry. Have you ever been sent to Coventry? I have. In fact, you sent me. It isn't pleasant, I can tell you. Perhaps we shall come to grips after all. I advised you to come to grips with your characters, didn't I? Have I given you any new ideas? If I have, you ought to thank me, for they're what novelists want, I understand." As always, W.S. Panic surged up in Walter Streeter. He had never noticed all this time the most significant fact about the postcards, that each one came from a place geographically closer to him than the last. "I am coming nearer." He took an atlas and traced W.S.'s itinerary. An interval of 80 miles or so seemed to separate the stopping places. Walter lived in a large West Country town about that distance from Coventry. Walter came to a decision. Go to the police. The police were used to dealing with poison pens. If they laughed at him, so much the better. They didn't laugh, however. They said they thought the postcards were a hoax and that W.S. would never show up in the flesh. Then they asked if there was anyone who had a grudge against him. "No one that I know of," Walter said. They told him not to worry, but to let them know if further postcards came. A little comforted, Walter went home. It was quite true what he'd told them, that he had no enemies. He wasn't a man of strong personal feelings. Such feelings as he had went into his books. In his books he'd drawn some pretty nasty characters. Not of recent years, however. There was good in everyone, but in the past, he recalled, when he was younger and more inclined to see things as black or white, he'd let himself go once or twice. He didn't remember his old books very well, but there was a character in one of them, the outcast, into whom he'd really got his knife. He had written about him with vindictiveness, as if he was a real person whom he was trying to expose. He never felt a twinge of pity for him, even when he paid the penalty for his misdeeds on the gallows. He had so worked himself up that the idea of this dark, malevolent creature had almost frightened him. Odd that he couldn't remember the character's name. He took the book down from the shelf and turned the pages. Even now they affected him uncomfortably. Yes, here it was. William. He would have to look back to find the surname. William Stainsforth. His own initials. He didn't think the coincidence meant anything, but it weakened his resistance to his obsession. So uneasy was he that when the next postcard came, it came as a relief. "Does this remind you of anything?" he read, and involuntarily he turned the postcard over. He saw a picture of a jail, Gloucester Jail. He stared at it as if it could tell him something, then with an effort went on reading. "I'm quite close now. All being well, I look forward to seeing you sometime this weekend. Then we can really come to grips. I wonder if you'll recognize me. As always, W.S." Walter took the postcard straight to the police station and asked if he could have police protection over the weekend. The officer in charge smiled at him and said he was sure it was a hoax, but he would tell someone to keep an eye on the place. It was Tuesday, and Walter Streeter had plenty of time to think about the weekend. At first, he felt he wouldn't be able to live through the interval, but strange to say, his confidence increased as he set himself to work. So passed the days, and the dawn of Friday seemed like any other day, until something jerked him out of his self-induced trance, and suddenly he asked himself, when does a weekend begin? A long weekend begins on Friday. At that, his panic returned. He went to the street door and looked out. Everything was normal. When Saturday came, bringing no postcard, his panic had almost subsided. He nearly rang up the police to tell them not to bother to send anyone after all. But they were as good as their word. They did send someone. Between tea and dinner, the time when weekend guests most commonly arrive. Walter went to the door, and there he saw a policeman standing. The first policeman he'd ever seen in Charlotte Street. Should he go and speak to his unknown guardian? Offer him a cup of tea or a drink? It would be nice to hear him laugh at Walter's fancies, but no. Somehow he felt his security the greater when its source was impersonal and anonymous. It was contrary to his routine to work after dinner, but tonight he did. A sort of exaltation possessed him. The words ran off his pen. In his snug little study, the silence purred around him. He didn't even hear the doorbell till it had been ringing for some time. A visitor? At this hour? His knees trembling, he went to the door, scarcely knowing what he expected to find. So what was his relief, on opening it, to see the doorway filled by the tall figure of a policeman. Without waiting for the man to speak, come in, my dear fellow," he exclaimed. He held his hand out, but the policeman didn't take it. "You must have been cold out there. I didn't know that it was snowing, though," Walter added, seeing the snowflakes on the policeman's cape and helmet. "Come in and warm yourself." "Thanks," said the policeman. "I can't stay long there. I've got a job to do, as you know." "Oh, yes," said Walter. "A silly job, I'm afraid. I suppose you know what it's about, the postcards?" The policeman nodded. "But nothing can happen to me as long as you're here," said Walter. Still in his cape and helmet, the policeman looked round. "So this is where you work," he said. "Yes, I was writing when you rang." "Some poor devils for it, I expect," the policeman said. "Oh, why?" Walter was hurt by his unfriendly tone, and noticed how hard his gooseberry eyes were. "I'll tell you in a minute," said the policeman. And then the telephone bell rang. Walter excused himself and hurried from the room. "This is the police station," said a voice. "Mr. Streeter, how is everything at your place? All right, I hope? I'll tell you why I ask. I'm sorry to say we quite forgot about that little job we were going to do for you. Bad coordination, I'm afraid." "But you did send someone?" "No, Mr. Streeter. But there's a policeman here in this very house." There was a pause at the other end of the line. "He can't be one of our chaps. Did you see his number by any chance?" "No." After another pause, the voice said, "Would you like us to send somebody now?" "Yes, please." We'll be with you right away, sir. Walter put back the receiver. What now, he asked himself. A policeman of any sort was something to be reckoned with, but a rogue policeman. And how long would it take the real police to come? While he was debating, the door opened and his guest came in. No room's private when the street door's passed, he said. Had you forgotten I was a policeman? Was? Said Walter, edging away from him. You are a policeman. I've been other things as well, the policeman said. Thief, blackmailer, not to mention murderer, you should know. I don't know what you mean, Walter said. I've never set eyes on you before. Oh, haven't you? The man said. But you've thought about me, and you've written about me. You've got some fun out of me, didn't you? Now I'm going to get some fun out of you. You made me just as nasty as you could. Wasn't that doing me harm? You hadn't any pity on me, had you? Well, I'm not going to have any pity on you. But I tell you, I don't know you. You don't know me? You did all that to me and then forgot me. You forgot William Stainsforth? William Stainsforth? The name in the book? Yes. I was a scapegoat, wasn't I? You unloaded all your self-dislike on me. Now, as one WS to another, what shall I do if I behave in character? I don't know. You ought to know. You fathered me. What would William Stainsforth do if he met his old dad in a quiet place? His kind old dad who made him swing. You never gave me a chance, did you? Well, I'm going to give you one. If you can tell me of one virtue you ever credited me with, just one redeeming feature. Well, then I'll let you off. And if I can't? Well, then that's just too bad. We'll have to come to grips. And you know what that means. You took off one of my arms once, but I've still got the other. Walter stared at the man's face, his face which seemed to be always in shadow, as if it was something the light couldn't touch. He searched his memory, but his memory would give up nothing. I must invent something, he thought, and suddenly he saw in his mind's eye the last page of the book. Then, with the speed and magic of a dream, each page appeared before him until the first was reached, and he realized that what he was looking for was not there. There was not one hint of good. And he felt with a kind of exultation that unless he testified to this, the cause of goodness everywhere would be betrayed. There's nothing to be said for you, he shouted. You want me to whitewash you, do you? Why, the very snowflakes on you are turning black. How dare you ask me for a character? I've given you one already. Do you expect me to say a good word about you now? I'd rather die. Stainsforth's one arm shot out. Then, die, he said. The police, when they arrived, found Walter Streeter slumped across the study table. His body was still warm, but he was dead. It was easy to tell how he died. He had been strangled. Of his assailant there was no trace. And how he came to have snowflakes on him remained a mystery, for no snow was reported from any district on the day he died.